Coming up on the live and interactive ACSA legislative lunch break, Edgar and I will get you all of your latest news and information from the state capitol and CDE with an in-depth analysis on how it impacts you and your school community. Plus, we are going to take you inside the state capitol, get you up to date on some valuable legislation and those bills sponsored by ACSA.
The ACSA legislative lunch break starts now.
And it's just after 1 o'clock. We welcome you on a Wednesday to the live and interactive ACSA legislative lunch break, along with ACSA's executive director, Dr. Edgar Zasweta. I'm Naj Alikhan, ACSA Senior Director of Marketing and Communications. Welcome. We are honored to have you with us here on a Wednesday. Go ahead and jump into the chat and say hello and let us know where you're watching from. Edgar, how are you today?
Good to have you back, Naj. I know I'm glad we got you off that beach. I don't know if you saw it or not last week, but I know our team there somehow captured some pictures of you at the beach, and the fact that you pulled yourself away to get back here.
It was hard.
Appreciate you.
Yeah.
But Michael was telling me some stats, and I would think I was more impressed with this, and we'll talk about this. I know we're gonna have our 5-year anniversary show here in a couple weeks. I think of the hundreds of shows that I forget how many what the number is, but that you've missed only 2.
Yeah.
That's some dedication right there.
Hey, look, as I've been told, when you and I are on here, it brings a certain magic. And I always feel like at least one of us needs to be here. So with as much traveling as you do, I always feel like one of us has to be here in the seat. So last week being show 181 and knowing that that was like only
I'm told that you've made it to 178 shows at the 180 at the time, so that's quite impressive. Your dedication is admirable here. I can't say my batting average a little bit lower, but I try to make the most of the times I'm here.
Listen, when you saying that, just remember that when my evaluation comes out, I would appreciate that. Folks, we've got 2 of our members of our ACSA governmental relations team coming up in just a couple of moments to talk to you about some of the ACSA sponsored bills that are being reviewed inside the legislature right now, and the budget process. We'll get you an update on all of that in just a couple of moments. Edgar, I think it's worth just taking a dive into what we've been seeing in Los Angeles these last few days, especially because you have been an LA Unified employee with immigration protests taking place. The update: the mayor of Los Angeles put in a curfew last night, and despite some arrests, the LA Times reporting that it was a tamer night. The curfew went into effect after several days of confrontation between immigration and customs enforcement agents and supporters of California's immigrant population. The confrontation led to 4 days of protests. During those 4 days, dozens of businesses have been damaged, and there's been many confrontations between protesters and law enforcement. The Trump administration called in the California National Guard and federal troops to manage the situation. Tuesday night, Governor Newsom held a news conference where he accused the president of making the situation worse.
We do not want our streets militarized by our own armed forces, not in LA, not in California, not anywhere. We're seeing unmarked cars in school parking lots, kids afraid of attending their own graduation.
I want to talk about, Edgar, before we dive into what's happening in Los Angeles, specifically about the impact on students, on schools, and on their family. On Monday, LA Unified Superintendent Alberto Carvalho and the district school board held a news conference, and they had a united front on supporting students, which was, I think, really important. The district announced that they are deploying their own police force, with school police setting up a safety perimeter around campuses and school events, this according to the LA Times. That includes graduation ceremonies, and of note, there are more than 100 graduations taking place yesterday and today in Los Angeles and the surrounding communities. The district police presence is all in an effort to keep immigration agents away from students and families. Carvalho said the district stands, quote, strongly on the right side of the law.
Our schools are places of education and inspiration, not fear and intimidation. Many of us here are immigrants or children of immigrants. We would be hypocrites if we took a step backwards from the position of protecting those who today face what our parents or ourselves faced.
And I want to point this out, Edgar. It's worth noting in a recent ACSA survey, this of school administrators at all levels, 63% of our respondents reported increased student absences due to fears surrounding immigration reform and enforcement. 72% observed a negative impact on students' mental health, and engagement from parents and students had declined significantly by 66% and 54%, respectively. Carvalho taught specifically about intimidation and its impact on school campuses.
As I'm addressing you, there are two schools in our community that within a couple of blocks we see federal vans parked. No action has been taken, but we interpret those actions as actions of intimidation, instilling fear that may lead to self-deportation. That is not the community we want to be. That is not the state or the nation that we ought to be.
So, Edgar, just, for our viewers who may not be familiar, of course, you grew up in Southern California. You worked for LA Unified. Just your thoughts on everything that you saw. Even though I was on vacation, you and I talked extensively about what we were seeing and how this impacts students, how this impacts our members down in Southern California. Just your thoughts with everything you've seen.
Yeah, and I think it's worth noting, obviously, so much of the attention on LA there, and given the activities, given what's happened in the last week, it's been a difficult week. I think it's worth pointing out that it's not just LA, that this has been happening around the state. We've had reports of in San Diego, in Oakland. I think the graphic you put there, Naj, kind of underscores kind of what our perspective has been since day one. We've been having, unfortunately, we're having this conversation pre-January about what may happen, and we always try to use the lens of the things that are, is something in the best interest of students? Is it in the best interest of learning? And I think just flatly, it's hard for anybody to make an argument that this somehow is going to benefit our students, benefit our community. I think the governor and Superintendent Carvalho stated it perfectly there, right? When you have families fundamentally afraid to go to school, where you have families, parents, students who should be celebrating what our system, what our country, frankly, these are products of our system here in the United States in their graduation. And we can't even appropriately acknowledge and celebrate those students and those families because they're afraid of their livelihood, because they're afraid of whether they'll have a future in this country. And it goes far beyond, folks could have perspectives about illegal immigration, but I think that, again, their surveys state that folks don't even feel safe, even when they're legally here, even if they have full documentation. This is causing fear. We've heard this, and now it's playing out itself in action. I mean, I had family this week, frankly, and these is family that are U.S. citizens that, and they know they maybe they're afraid we have a larger audience than we do here, whatnot. They're like, hey, just don't speak out too much because, look what's happening. You had people in L.A. who voiced their concern, and now they're going after them, right? And this is just my family not knowing any better, just being worried about us, right? Like if you're critical of the administration or whatnot, then that somehow you get a target on you. And I think that's the perception, even for people that have full documentation, right? But I think what just hits me, just thinking about this, that regardless of status, these are our products. These are our children that our schools here in the United States are educating. And for us to just completely be causing this disruption, which isn't good for the community, isn't good for learning. I find it hard to argue that this is good for our future. It's a bit of a sad week and a sad few days, I know, there in Los Angeles and across the state, in terms of us now seeing this play itself out in ways that we spend a lot of time throwing out the resources and whatnot, and now it's kind of playing itself out in action.
Yeah, you know what, Edgar, you said something, and it got me kind of thinking because my daughter graduated a couple of weeks ago here in downtown Sacramento, where her school district does all of its graduation ceremonies. And I was thinking about what the normal police presence is when we have events here in downtown, but to know that some of the students would have been very worried, very afraid, maybe even skip the graduation because of what's happening. I mean, it really puts it in perspective, Edgar, that you have all of these kids that have spent, you know, more than a decade in school, just year after year, class after class, and have this fear of being able to show up at this ceremony where they're being celebrated. It just really hits you. And I have to assume, in fact, I know all of our viewers, our members, if you look through that perspective, you just see what the impact is for these kids, for that next generation of our leaders and our educators and our doctors and scientists.
Yeah, no, I think that's well said, Naj. I think that this is it's pushing another pressure on our system. It's putting yet another pressure on our educators, right? Where they're now having to somehow reassure families that they're going to be okay coming to school for the learning, coming to school for these celebrations. It's putting our folks in a very difficult place. One that we say it all the time. If families aren't attending schools, if kids aren't attending school every day, then they're not learning. They're not getting the resources that they need. And I think what's taken place here in terms of these increased actions is only seeing that. And there's countless examples. That's why, just to underscore, I know there's a case here with one of our members in Torrance where we have the student there and their family that we were getting reports have been deported back to Honduras. I was seeing another report in Oakland. So this is, it's by design. And I think, us from looking at this from the vantage point of the school community about the impact, I think that is going to continue to be our focus there, right? Even respecting that people may have different views on the overall subject. This isn't good for kids. This isn't good for education. So I think we have a responsibility to push back on it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well said. Well said. Let's go ahead and switch topics over here. We're in June. We're part of that legislative process. We're coming up on the budget. Bills and legislation being discussed right now inside the state capitol. Let's bring in two experts right now to talk about what's happening. Ivan Carrillo, ACSA Senior Director of Policy and Governmental Relations, and Cordell Hampton, legislative advocate here for ACSA. Ivan and Cordell, great to have you both here on the ACSA Legislative Lunch Break. Cordell, let's start because we talked about the immigration enforcement in Los Angeles since the top of the show. There are a number of bills that are moving right now in the state capitol through the legislature related to ICE activity on school campuses for how schools respond to the ICE agent activity. How's ACSA been engaged in this process?
Yeah, I mean, just before I hop to that question, I really think Edgar had really hit on the point is we're very aware of these instances of immigration enforcement coming onto campuses or being near school campuses that have led to students and their families either being deported or afraid to come to school. And I think you hear this a lot from us, but on this particular issue, if you hear any instances or having instances, please let us know. We're in constant communication with the state attorney general's office, as well as the administration. I'm just trying to figure out ways and keeping that kind of line of communication open. So if there needs to be kind of adjustment or flexibilities, we can work on that together. Since January, ACSA has been engaged in and has tracked several bills. Namely, there are two that gained the most attention, one of them being AB 49 by Marisucci and SB 48 by Gonzalez. AB 49 being only allowing immigration enforcement officers on school campuses with a valid identification, a valid judicial warrant, court order, or exigent circumstances. This is closely tied to the AG's guidance for schools related to immigration enforcement. ACSA has a support position on this bill. There's also SB 48, which is sponsored by the State Superintendent of Public Instruction, prohibits LEAs to the extent possible from allowing U.S. immigration enforcement onto school campuses and constricting from search warrants. This bill is currently have a support amendment position, and we've been in constant communication with both the Assembly and the author's office on working on amendments to clarify exigent circumstances. But this bill is currently the Assembly Education Committee And then just a couple other notable bills. There's also AB 1348 by Assemblymember Baines, which adds immigration enforcement activities to the list of emergencies that districts can claim and be held harmless for the J13A process. And there's also SB 98 Perez, which is related to notification. So we're tracking all these bills and keeping you guys updated on them as well.
Yvonne, thanks for taking some time, yourself and Cordell. I know it's a busy time, just what's happening across the street and keeping track of all of these issues that here where we're talking about. All right, so let's do, I know we do this from occasion, let's do Legislature 101. You know, we talk a lot about all these deadlines, fiscal, legislative, floor session, all of the insider baseball. Kind of give us a bit broader vantage point about where we're at in the legislative calendar and what's coming next as we're entering kind of these summer periods for all these proposed laws.
Yeah, we just passed a big marker, which was the House of Origin deadline. So that means that every bill that was introduced by a state assembly member had to get through the policy committees, and if they had a price tag, had to get through the fiscal committees, and then eventually the entire assembly floor by last week. And then the flip side of that is the Senate then would have to do the same on their side. So these are significant markers. I will say that at this point where things really start to heat up, things really get real. You see a large amount of deference often provided to folks that are within the same house. So the level of scrutiny now is going to be so much higher now that bills are in the opposite house. The dust settles in terms of folks' positions on bills oftentimes by this point. So the advocacy, again, just really turns up a few notches from this point forward. So now you have policy committees that have already started meeting. Our team has been really active here, even this morning where there was already some education policy committee hearings that took place and a couple of our co-sponsored bills up. So it'll continue to be heavy legislative activity through mid-July. At that point, there's a summer recess for about a month, but a lot of movement that will take place for the weeks ahead.
And folks, if you have questions for Yvonne and Cordell, go ahead and throw those into the chat. We'll try and tackle some of them at the back end of the show. I do want to point out, and I think that Yvonne and Edgar and I were all chuckling at this, but Neri put in a comment in the chat about a GoFundMe to decorate Cordell's office.
Hey,
So
I think Neri's doing Cordell wrong. I see at least another frame than from last time he was on. I see growth.
I don't know. I think I stuck in the same frame.
It's the same frame of you and me back there. That's all we got.
Maybe it's just my eyes playing tricks on me. I could swear there's one extra diploma or maybe another one of those
You got two
markers.
diplomas.
I see some growth there in his office. So
Yeah. Okay. All right.
slowly but surely,
Well, Neri,
progress
we'll
doesn't happen
that.
overnight.
Yeah. No. We'll certainly consider that. Cordell, let's talk about another big issue this year. It's been legislation related to charter schools. There are two bills right now seeking various changes to oversight practices and audits, one by Assemblyman Al Maritsucci and another authored by Senator Angelique Ashby. What's ACSA's take on these two proposals?
Yeah, so both AB 84 and SB 414 by Ashby are meant to codify recommendations from the FIGMAT and LEA report on best practices regarding non-classroom based charters. AB 84, last week the bill had a very close vote. It had 43 ayes, 25 noes, but it made it off the assembly floor. Legislators had very spirited debate about this bill. Some members were hesitant to support the bill because they felt like it wasn't baked fully and before heading to the Senate. However, other members recognized that the moratorium is going to end very soon, and so they needed to have a vehicle to address bad actors. Unlike AB 84, which faced a little bit of headwind, SB 414 by Senator Ashby got off the Senate floor pretty easily with a 30-1 vote. Although ACSA has a neutral position on both of these bills, both members and their staff have been extremely accessible and willing to take feedback to improve both their bills despite our position. So although we're neutral, we are still very much in the mix in addressing our members' concerns on these two bills.
Yvonne, I know one of the things that we talk a lot about is like the bills. Oftentimes we're talking about the bills we don't like and we're trying to, play defense on those. we also are in the business from time to time trying to push something forward that's actually going to help the field, right? And one of those notable bills, the ACSA sponsored bill that our folks have put forward, is AB 1224, and this is the bill having to do with extending the substitute teacher time that they're authorized to be in a classroom. I know that's an issue we hear a lot from our folks, given the need, given the substitute shortages. What can you tell us on the progress on that legislation?
Yeah, no, I'm happy to report that this bill continues to move. So our audience has certainly heard about this bill. We've been talking about it for many months, but we're working really hard to ensure that there's greater continuity in classrooms, that substitute teachers have the ability to be in a classroom, general ed and special ed, up to 60 days. Currently, you just have a revolving door. You mentioned the substitute shortage, the teacher shortage that exists as well certainly exacerbates the issue. And I'm happy to report that it's been moving. We did receive some opposition to our bill here in recent weeks, namely from the California Teachers Association. But I'm happy to report that it's a broad coalition that is supporting this effort. And Saret Kaminsky, our legislative advocate, has done a tremendous job in laying the groundwork. And so what you're hearing as a response to that groundwork that's been laid is so many legislators that are picked up our talking points and talked about how when you have a revolving door, that this is not in the best interest of kids. And so really hopeful in terms of this bill's ability to continue to move. We're working on some possible amendments to try to address some of the concerns that were raised by CTA. But shout out to Saret and shout out to the field as well. This was a priority during legislative action days. We've continued to leverage members of ours to help tell the local stories and why this is important. But yeah, this continues to move and hoping to continue to give positive reports to you all in the weeks and months ahead.
Cordell, another ACSA-sponsored bill, Assembly Bill 1233 by Josh Hoover, trying to address the problem of not having classified employees' history with school employment or misconduct charges. This bill failed in the fiscal committee. So is there any hope for this proposal?
Yeah, so although AB 1233, which is our co-sponsored bill with Riverside County Office of Education, would have established a classified employee database, was held in Senate Appropriations Committee. There is another bill, SB 848 by Senator Perez, that ACSA is in support of, which mirrors the provisions from our sponsored legislation in that bill, in addition to 12 other recommendations that are from FIGMAT report. So although our sponsored legislation is no longer moving in the process, we're still looking to SB 848 to make sure that our priority still remains. And SB 848 is scheduled to be heard in the Assembly Education Committee either early to mid-July. But shout out to Dorothy Johnson, who's been extremely active in this field. I don't think we'd be as far as we would be without her on this. So,
Hey, Vaughn, I know one of the other things aside from the policy that we keep an eye on, and I know you and your staff obviously are very attuned to this piece of it because it does play a bigger picture, is what's happening on political front. I know there's some developments this week in terms of some of the leadership or upcoming leadership in the state Senate. What can you tell us there, and what does it mean for ACSA?
Yeah, so we the next leader of the state Senate has been voted on and identified. So Senator Monique Limon will be the next pro tem. That's significant for a number of reasons. And one, it's historical. She'd be the first Latina to lead the state Senate. It's another leader that represents a Central Coast community. So she's from the Santa Barbara area as well. But she's been a longtime friend of ACSA, longtime champion of public education. So certainly we've celebrated and have worked very closely with our current pro tem, Senator Mike McGuire, but feel good about the transition that will take place. And that transition, while the vote already happened by the Senate Democratic Caucus, the transition won't happen until early next year.
Yeah, no, exciting news. I know Monique Limon's a old friend of ACSA, and given her education experience there, I think that's great to see her in the role. Now, you did say something that I'm not going to be the judge of this. Maybe we'll put this out to the viewers. Where does Southern California end, and where does Central California start? I know that's a controversial thing.
That's
I'm going to pretend to know. Maybe folks from the area can tell me where's the line there. But in any case, topic for another day.
Hey, don't put me in the middle of that.
Isn't it like anything south of
See, Naj
Bakersfield?
He's gonna say something.
I'll step in it too. I feel like it starts at Slow. Slow is when you start into Central.
Oh,
that's where the border is.
I think so.
I think people are gonna take issue with that.
I grew up in Sacramento thinking that this was Northern California, right? This was the end of things.
This is Northern California, Yvonne. Come on, this is Northern California right here. Yvonne, let me just ask you real quick, 30 seconds on the budget right now. Where are we as far as the deadline? Where are we on this process?
So the legislature has reached a deal, the two houses, Assembly and Senate. They're going to be voting on that deal here in the coming days. The vote is expected Friday. What's important to note here is that that bill just reflects the two-party agreement. Again, the two houses, the Assembly and the Senate. It does not reflect an agreement with the governor. So we're still waiting to see where things ultimately land. But anything that you hear reports on in terms of what was voted on here that in these coming days, again, does not reflect a final budget deal. We're really concerned about some of the things contained in the legislature's package. One of them being a significant reduction to the discretionary block grant dollars. Another one is the continued under appropriation or the approval of the governor's under appropriation of Prop 98. We're activating quickly. Our advocacy against these things has already started. We're going to continue to beat those drums and hopefully influence the final outcome. But a deal probably won't come until next week, if not until the final week of June.
Did you see that our great board member Diego Ochoa wanted to get in the mix and said next you'll ask if Sacramento is in the Bay Area?
I'm not going to get into those, but Del Nor, I will say that is definitely Northern California.
That's crazy talk, though. Sacramento Bay Area.
Yeah,
I'll take a position on that one.
Yeah, absolutely. I will absolutely take a position on that one as well. Yvonne Carrillo and Cordell Hampton from ACSA's Governmental Relations Department. Yvonne and Cordell, thanks so much for being with us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Folks, lots to tell you about coming up here this summer for ACSA. We'll go ahead and start with our AI Summit. This is happening July 10th through 11th in Santa Barbara. This is a really, really great opportunity for you to learn about artificial intelligence. It's a 2-day in-person professional learning experience designed to empower educational leaders with the knowledge and tools to implement AI effectively and ethically in your schools. It's hosted by ACSA's AI Task Force at Cold Springs School District. Keynote presentations, collaborative workshops, expert panels, networking, hear from statewide leaders. You can register for the AI Summit at that bit.ly link right there, or you can go to ACSA.org/professional-learning. Folks, if you like what you've seen here on the ACSA Legislative Lunch Break, there are more ways for you to see it now. You can subscribe to us on YouTube, you can like us on Facebook, or you could go to LinkedIn. When you handle all of those things, you will get instant alerts when Edgar and I are going to come on with breaking news. And of course, a reminder about our regularly scheduled Wednesday show. And if you have great things happening in your school district, we want to tell those stories too. Go ahead and send in your photos, your talking points, your news releases to our EdCal editor, Michelle Carl at ACSA, mcarl@axa.org. Edgar, just a moment of privilege, if I might be able to do that. Want to pop up a picture of my daughter. This is Layla Alicon, a student and incoming senior at Cal State San Marcos. Yesterday, she was testifying at the Senate Education Committee, talking about ELOP. That is her very first time testifying at the state capitol. Did awesome. I say she was incoming freshman?
I think you messed that up. You may have said you got your daughters mixed up.
I got my daughters mixed up. She is an incoming senior at Cal State San Marcos. Just Want to make sure
That-
I
that-
clarified that.
That one has to make you feel old, that you have, that you have a senior there, almost
Yeah.
done with college. But what an awesome opportunity for her. And obviously, as I'm sure the GR team can relate to this, myself as well. Somebody who's done that gig of getting up there in front of all the legislators and your stating position. What a great experience. I'm happy to see that she's interested in policy, and I know she has a whole host of friends here who are willing to help shore the ropes or be a bad influence. One or the other.
Yeah, she was certainly excited. She gave us about 15 minutes of heads up and was like, "Hey, Dad, I'm going to be testifying in the Senate hearing." John Laird, our great friend, Senator John Laird, was the chairman inside that meeting. Was great. Was really great to her. So thank you for that. Folks, we hope you've enjoyed this edition of the ACSA Legislative Lunch Break. Remember, we are live and interactive Wednesdays here at 1 p.m. on ACSA Facebook, ACSA YouTube, and ACSA LinkedIn. Have a great rest of the day and rest of the week, and we'll see you next time.